Comprehensive view of the state of gleaning. Sean and Kathy interviewed over 100 gleaning organizations across the United States and Canada and analyzed data from over 150 organizations. In this session, Kathy will share the findings of the census about the important topic of volunteers, which we all cannot live without. First, a snapshot of the current state, who comprises the pool of the gleaning volunteers. What does the volunteer experience look like? What roles do they play? What training do they receive? What training should they receive? And most importantly, what can gleaning organizations do to recruit and retain volunteers and engage them as advocates to grow the gleaning movement across the United States and beyond? Thank you, Kathy.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Next slide, please. So, to talk about the role of volunteers, I wanted to, first of all, frame it in that we envision a future in which gleaners are adequately compensated for this essential work, with staff earning living wages and receiving health benefits. We acknowledge that achieving this will require significant new investment, but at the same time, we recognize the vital role of volunteer labor and deeply value their contributions. So in any conversation about volunteering, I want to talk about the impact that we have in terms of providing work without adequate compensation and without the ability to access health care. We know that that is a challenge, but we also acknowledge that there are people in different capacities of their life and with different capacity to volunteer. So any discussion we have about volunteering, I wanted to frame it that way. Next slide. So the struggle is real, right? One of the important consequences of inadequate funding, and Sean said most organizations now have between $40,000 and $60,000 is the overall budget. That is less than a budget for one FTE, right? And so many of us, as we are interviewing gleaners across the country, are doing this work on a part-time or seasonal basis. Many do not have health insurance. And so we acknowledge that most of the work that we're doing is staff augmentation. Volunteering is augmenting the staff that we have. And the staff that we have, I think many of you can live like this on certain days. It's difficult to scale, and it's when we were talking to people, burnout is real, right? So that is a thing that many gleaning organizations struggle with. Next slide, please. So volunteer capacity really is our ability, makes the ability for us to run our gleaning organizations. Without volunteers, as we talked about, staff capacity is limited, funding is limited. But 70% of you that we talked to said that volunteer recruitment is a challenge. And so we're going to talk a little bit about volunteer recruitment today. Many volunteers struggle with sustaining, or many organizations struggle with sustaining consistent turnout and managing volunteer logistics. So it's interesting, we heard from organizations who have been successful in diversifying their volunteer base to younger volunteers, that showing up is a problem. We've heard from volunteers, right? They sign up and then they don't show up. We've heard from many programs who rely on my demographic to glean that it's capacity is a problem. Folks can't lift, folks can't climb ladders. So there are volunteer challenges across the spectrum. Next slide, please. And there are general societal challenges that we have to acknowledge when we're talking about volunteering. So this is this is a statistic or a graph that is in the gleaning census. The median volunteer counts, as Sean alluded to, overall, we're finding that volunteer participation is down across the universe of organizations that we survey. And that is not unique to gleaning. It is not that people are choosing not to volunteer in gleaning. It's part of societal changes that are impacting volunteerism across the spectrum. The first was the pandemic. And in talking to some organizations, they have never built their volunteer base back to what it was pre-pandemic. People stopped volunteering during the COVID episode and haven't come back. Some issues that are impacting that aging of society are senior volunteers have capacity issues that may prevent them from volunteering in gleaning. A diminishment of third places. This is very interesting in that societally, we are seeing that third places, so not your home and not your workspace, but somewhere in the community where people can gather and have interactions with each other, those places are going away or being privatized so that muscle memory, that being able to go out and engage with larger community, those spaces are no longer available as they have been in the past. So that would include something like, my father was a member of a bowling league. Who's a member of a bowling league anymore? My father was also a member of, he happened to be Irish, so the Irish Cultural Center, and he would go to the Cultural Center to engage in activities, play bingo, and unfortunately for him, drink. But it was a viable third space, and so that societal change about diminishing third spaces makes the idea of volunteering something that people aren't used to. This is a part of our society that is unfortunately slipping away. And then we can't ignore economic pressure. So it is very difficult in today's economics for people to find the time to engage in volunteer activities when they're working a second job, when they are participating in the gig economy. It's not difficult these days to find a Lyft driver because so many people are needing second employment just to put food on the table and make rent. And that these things together, and I'm sure there are others, are impacting volunteering not only for gleaning, but across the spectrum of society. Next slide. And so here we're going to take a look at who is the volunteer base for our gleaning organizations. Seniors, those of us who are 60 plus, make up the majority of gleaners for 57% of the organizations that we've interviewed. Raise your hand if seniors make up the bulk of your gleaning organization. Yeah, that 57% is pretty accurate. Next slide, please. More than 80% of gleaners identify as white. So I am your prototype gleaner right here. So this is another challenge that gleaning organizations face, is how to engage all members of our community in this activity in the capacity that people are able to participate. And people have come up to me and said, how do I engage the Spanish-speaking community that's in my area? How do I engage the tribal members that are in my area? And so I want to give you two references, if that's what you're thinking about. Gorge Gleaners in Oregon has done a fantastic job of reaching out to the Hispanic community that works and lives in the Columbia River Gorge area. And the reason that they've been successful is the North American that is the director of that organization happens to be bilingual Spanish speaking and has engaged with first one community member to build trust. And from that, the relationship has grown, being able to show up at events that are part of that community. The other reference I want to give is Ed Seal, and Ed is here today. And Ed has made fantastic progress in engaging the tribal communities in the Washington State area. Washington State is home to many indigenous, unfortunately, reservations or indigenous tribal lands. And Ed has made inroads in engaging the tribal community in his gleaning organization. And once again, it's step one, building a trusted relationship with one individual in the community and using that trusted relationship to engage with others. It is not a fast process because there are many barriers to this engagement. If you're a person of color, if you're a tribal member, and you walk into a gleaning event and everyone else looks like me, that can be off-putting. And so there is work that needs to be done to make sure that our organizations are ready to welcome people that are different than our normal gleaning base. And there's work to be done on the part of your average volunteer when we're welcoming other people into our organization. Percentage of volunteers that are female. So 75% of the organizations were reporting majority female, and then 51 to 74%, another 50% of organizations. So this purple and green area shows you it is vastly women that are showing up. Vastly women that are showing up. And this year we had an affinity group talking about, and that's part of our programming with AGO. We not only host our coffee chats once a month, we have smaller breakout groups where we talk about topical items. And we hosted an affinity group talking about women and the role we play in society, about basically picking up the pieces. Women are America's social safety net. And so the fact that we have not successfully engaged half of the population in gleaning has an impact on our organizations, and it has an impact on men. Men are not engaged with doing this kind of community support work. And so we have work to do to engage, and I'm glad to see the men in the audience today. That is very heartwarming, but the statistics show that we need to engage the men in this operation. And, you know, if we're looking at a hotbed of opportunity, senior men do represent an opportunity for engagement. Their wives are already showing up. So it's like, bring your husband to Glee Day. And then also, you know, there's a lot of noise, I would say, now talking about the crisis that men are facing in terms of social isolation. And so this is an opportunity to engage men in something other than staying home and doing their home-based pursuits. So I would say, you know, fresh target for volunteers, we've got to find a way to engage men, and we've got to ready our organizations to have men come in. You know, for a bunch of basically old white ladies, we need to be able to welcome youth, we need to be able to welcome people of color, and we need to be able to welcome men And, they haven't shown up to date, but we have to ready ourselves to welcome them. Next. The food insecure. So we gathered only 36 organizations out of our 115 organizations that we were able to survey reported on this. And we found that 19% of the ones that reported the volunteers were food insecure. And this kind of is an underrepresentation of who is food insecure among our volunteer base, because 6 out of 10 food insecure folks are senior women. Senior women are facing food insecurity at a rate that's higher than the average population. And so we have to be thinking about engaging with the food insecure as we are putting together our practices. A lot of cleaning organizations do not allow their volunteers to take home food. It was surprising to me. Every organization that I have cleaned with allows volunteers to take home food. A group subset of organizations that we interviewed actually allow the volunteers to make the distribution decisions, and it may include just taking home the food to their family network or to their church group, but others don't do that. And so when you're recognizing that there is increasing food insecurity in the community, think about your volunteer practices and enabling the volunteers to take home food and make distribution choices. Another way to engage a part of the community that may not be served. All right.
Yeah. Not that it's a right or wrong decision, but do you know what motivates the organizations that would ask the volunteers not to take food? What's behind that?
Yeah, so I think it's they're seeing their role as participating in a structured food system. So they've got a designated pantry or food bank that the food is going to. And so their thinking is that it's going to a food insecure population, and perhaps not acknowledging that the very people that are showing up are food insecure. Because, we don't wear a badge. Hey, I'm food insecure. Most people who are food insecure don't talk about that. And so, especially, I would say, since the majority of our cleaners are older and white, there's a lot of shame that goes into food insecurity. So I think that is the logic of it. And so that's why I want to challenge you today to say, this is who is showing up right now. And the very people that are gleaning may also be in need. So think about how to think about your processes and maybe make some different decisions. And, not asking people, hey, if you're food insecure, you can take the food, but you others cannot. That probably wouldn't work out. All right, we're going to try something. And, the way it's been working, it may not work. So these are instructions for you, Brendan. You need to go to the Mentimeter and log in. We're going to try this sexy technology. If not, I have plan B. Yeah.
Or more in depth about why you think that shame is attached to food insecurity, the different reasons.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Why shame might be attached to food insecurity.
Why shame might be attached to food insecurity. Absolutely. And I'm going to talk about my experience with food insecurity. So as Barbara mentioned, I went through most challenging part of my life as my mother's caregiver. And at age 90, my mother's finances did not keep it pace with her life. She ran out of money. And so I was her interaction to the social service system, signing my mother up for EBT, SNAP, or food stamps here in the state of California, actually. So my mother and I were middle class, right? I grew up in a middle class environment, so accessing social services was not something familiar or part of what I expected. And so the interactions that came with that, I personally, as my mother's designated shopper because she was disabled, couldn't go to the grocery store, used the EBT card. And I remember at Safeway having my EBT card declined because there was some processing issue. And the cashier and the people in line, the negative, the looks I got, I had to go to customer service to resolve it, yada, yada, yada. I will never forget that. And here, I am, that was not an experience I was ready for. It was not something I grew up with. And I can only imagine if that was my experience as a younger person or a less successful in navigating systems. It's difficult in the United States to say, I am lacking access to food. Do you want me to go? Did I answer your question?
Well, I mean, kind of, if that's what you're, I mean, I've also experienced it, felt it. I'm just kind of like wondering what else is connected to that. That makes any sense, like at a deeper level.
At a deeper level?
Yeah, it's kind of involved in that. I don't know.
Expanding on the impact of capitalism on food system. I'm not sure that I'm best equipped. I mean, if there's anyone else to talk about that, I'm ready. For now, we're going to try a new cool thing. I want you to take your phone, if you've got one, use that QR code, and that'll take you to menti.com, where you're going to input this code, and we're going to respond to what are your biggest challenge with volunteers. And if the whole thing works, we're going to see a word cloud of what you input.
While this is happening, there was a question on the Zoom.
Oh, what's the Zoom question?
The Zoom question is, what language or systems are gleaning groups using to offer gleaned food to their volunteers?
What language or systems are gleaning groups using to offer food to their volunteers? So the ones that we've talked about that do that successfully, that is way, way, way early in the process, in their recruitment process. They make it very clear that that is their policy, that volunteers can take home food. They encourage people to bring their own grocery bags. And so they make it a universal policy as part of their recruitment. It's working. It's working. We'll give it another couple minutes. Has everybody who wanted to input? No? Waiting 2 minutes.
Kathy, you might have to read some of the smaller.
I will. Oh, I just had double cataract surgery, so I'll do my best. I'm your quintessential senior gleaner, blind and with a back issue. All right, I'm going to start reading some of these out. So we're seeing the 3 big issues that people are inputting. Consistency, right? Folks showing up in a consistent manner. Transportation, there's a huge barrier to gleaning in many areas. Adequate access to transportation. Recruitment, right? We're talking about that. That's on us. And so we've got some of these other issues. with reliability, recruiting in rural areas. That is a specific challenge that many of us face. If you've got a large geographic area, part of that area may not be served. Rural areas. Who lives in rural areas in America? Seniors and low-income folks. That's who makes up rural areas. Seniors, challenges with capacity. Low-income folks, challenges no time. You're busy earning for your family. We've also got that issue with the consistency, showing up with summer attendance, one-off gleaners, lack of understanding. We've got a whole track that we're going to talk about as to how to adequately tell the gleaning story. How many of you have had the experience of, I work for a gleaning organization, and people look at you like, huh?
Cleaning?
Gleaning? What is gleaning? Are you saying cleaning? Yeah, so getting our story out there, and that's on us. We can do a better job with that. Who is George? George is a problem. I want to know who this George is. Okay.
I have a different answer to them.
You have a different answer, George. Okay, so these are the issues that have been brought up in terms of volunteer recruitment, and we're seeing that reflected here. Next slide, please.
I have to go back to it.
Oh, that's right, you have to switch.
Mhm.
Yes, we're keeping it interesting.
Anytime can I mention something?
Yes.
I know insurance. Has anyone else thought about that too? Because, so in the urban scene, we're going on people's own properties.
That's right.
And I saw from pictures here, there's like big spaces and nice trees. You're not really gonna break the window.
Right.
But we can break sprinklers, we step on, we can break their heart that's hanging, we can mess up something. And so we don't send volunteers to food tree gardens. We only send paid staff. If we wanted to send volunteers, we would have an issue because we sell the fruit. And we can get sued for them working free.
Right.
And so that's why we have this interesting thing, we don't volunteers.
Oh, that's very, very interesting. Yeah, I volunteer with Portland Fruit Tree, which is an urban backyard gleaner, and they have to really pay attention to their training and the size of the gleaning group compared to the space that we're in, to avoid situations like you talked about, broken sprinklers and other things. So we can move on, we've done that. So I wanted to make a shout out to the all volunteer programs. And so we've got a couple represented here today. Based on our survey, they make up as much as 13% of the gleaning movement. So all volunteer programs with minimal financial resources, an average of about $11,000 and just 863 per organization. So these are very bare bones grassroots organizations. But in 2024, the year of our survey, they rescued over 380,000 pounds of produce from farms, an average of 24,000 pounds per organization, engaging over 2,000 volunteers. And the work of the all volunteer programs usually goes well beyond cleaning, 30%, processed food for value-added products, 75% distribute food directly to community members, and just 30% have access to cold storage. So this is still part of the gleaning picture. We've got some very grassroots, bare bones organizations that are operating without staff, without access to cold storage. From my personal point of view, that's not the model that we want to continue with. We want to be able to support these organizations as they're doing their work today, but we want to be able to find the funding to be able to provide them with paid staff and the cold storage that they need. That's just the minimum, kind of the baseline. It's very interesting to me that gleaning kind of exists in this world outside of a consistent stream of public funding. And many of the public funding streams that gleaning organizations had leveraged went away in 2025. What was the election? Oh, 24, thank you. How we forget. Going forward, considerations for your organization.
11:48.
12:48.
Wait.
It's
We're at 11:45, what time?
Yeah, once you know.
Okay, we got time, I think. Okay. From volunteer gleaner to food waste
Oh, wait.
champion.
Yeah. We're just a few minutes over. I didn't see any activity
Okay,
people let down. But
okay. So most training and education that we provide as a group are safety training. You know, 50% of us do safety training and that's it, or harvest related issues. So there's an opportunity to up-level this with the population that we're working with. Even a brief educational moment at the start or end of the gleans that have significant impact. So the opportunity to talk about societal issues like why is there shame associated with food insecurity? Next slide, please. So another area that we can do a little bit better with is getting our volunteers to step up into becoming volunteer leaders. So many of us, the organizations that we talked about, don't just send a cadre of volunteers into the field. They have staff accompanying them, which limits our capacity because we have limited staff. So here's an opportunity is how do we recruit, train, and retain volunteers in a leadership capacity? And one of our experts is sitting right over here, Samantha and Food Forward. They do an incredible job with this. So if you're looking for mentorship opportunities for volunteer recruitment and specifically training leaders, you need to hit up Samantha.
I'll also call out Betsy and Maggie, because they are our volunteer team. So they really are experts.
Betsy and Maddie, thank you very much. Raise your hand. We've got the experts right here in this room. Next slide. Enabling volunteer leaders is really the key to unlocking capacity. No, we're good. Next. Membership model. Here's another really interesting model that exists uniquely in the Pacific Northwest. And so Skagit Gleaners, Morgan Curry is here today, not in this room, she's probably over there, runs an organization that has a membership model. Eugene area Gleaners in Washington, Oregon also has this model. And so they employ a membership model where gleaners are asked to pay a fee to participate in exchange for the share of produce. And this fee is on a sliding scale. So we've talked about that there are different levels of economic participation within our gleaning organizations. And so they've got not only a sliding scale, but they've got a, based on what you're participating, what your need is, it unlocks other social services that they provide, including access to a clothes closet. And I think this is super cool, access to a lending tool library specific for making value-added products. So they have a little closet where they've got canning supplies, they've got a dehydrator that they put on loan. So depending on where you're accessing this membership model, it unlocks this access to different social services provided under the umbrella of Skagit Gleaners. And I thought the value-added product lending library was super cool. So Morgan is going to be addressing us in the June or July coffee chat. Watch for that schedule. Next one. So strategies to diversify your volunteer base. What we're hearing, what we've heard is there are three kind of target areas. And one is local businesses. How many of you here today already have business groups coming out to glean? Okay, some it's iffy. I'm thinking, I can't remember, I think it's Reno. It was a Nevada-based gleaner. She is a pro at this. So she was a participant in our last coffee chat and very, very successful. And in Reno, they don't really have large employers in Reno. It's a lot of small and medium-sized business. She's been very, very successful in getting the local dentist office, the local insurance agency to come out and make this part of their community engagement. I mean, what's in it for them? They are looking good and going to find new clients for dentists and insurance. But she's been very successful in engaging in small local businesses. Some of the other urban gleaning organizations that I talked to, especially in the state of Washington, where there's a lot of tech, have been very successful in getting the Microsofts, the Googles of the world, where their employees are actually paid to do community service. A lot of the big tech companies, like to greenwash their image. And so they send their employees out to do this and pay them. That's very cool. And then they pay the organization too. Families and youth. Don't overlook kids. A lot of gleaning organizations do not allow youth to participate. And those that do find it to be a very meaningful experience. Bring your kid to glean. Now I know there's like terror. Oh my God, we can't even trust adults doing this. What if the kid falls off the ladder? But there are organizations that do that successfully. And we've already talked about the diversifying your volunteer base and the outstanding work done by George Gleaning, as well as Ed Seal, who's here today. So what are the next steps for your organization? Now I want to make sure we have time to do this. I don't want to keep you from lunch.
10 minutes over.
Oh, we're 10 minutes over. So I'm going to leave it here. We would have had another cool word cloud about what's next, but you can join my roundup this afternoon and we can talk about it then. Thank you so much.